Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, I would like to address the issue of elections. We have said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. It's now 45 years since the country's independence. And in that period, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so the nation has been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical ZANU-PF regime. The interesting question that we'd like to address tonight is that there is overwhelming evidence that ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. Overwhelming evidence that the process is so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step is to withdraw. The question then is, why have Zimbabweans continued to participate in a process that is so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step is to withdraw? And they have not failed, they failed to do so. Why? And to help me address this issue is Ben. Welcome, Ben.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. I have to agree, with you to say why. It baffles me up to this day. It's not that we do not know, because very soon after an election, we start complaining about the process, about the results, how the results are coming out, about the irregularities that we knew from before we participated in the election. So on whether we know or not, I think that we can safely say people know ZANU-PF rigs elections, and that our elections are so flawed and so illegal. And this was, further emphasized by the recent SADC report for the 2023 elections that stated that our elections did not even meet our constitutional requirements. So without a shadow of a doubt, I think we can now move from this point to say Zimbabwean elections are so flawed, so illegal, that participation really, really doesn't make any sense. That needs to be put a big tick to say we have come to that conclusion. If not, I really do not know what will ever convince us. I really don't see. So, it's a big why now.
Thank you, Ben. I just want to play this video clip of the Constitutional Court dealing with the challenge of the 2018 elections.
Zimbabwe, they've now held their recent elections, which went well.
International monitors had to force their way through angry crowds to deliver their verdict. They reported serious flaws in the process. It was not a level playing field. Many injured and 3 dead. The opposition says the shootings and the beatings cannot be justified. And an election in which Zimbabwe dared to dream has instead brought back its worst nightmares. There were running battles through the city centre, and the streets echoed to the sound of gunfire.
Zimbabwe, they've now held their recent elections, which went well.
You are ready now to start. I am ready. You may start.
Thank you, my lord. What ZEC has done is to violate the constitution, to violate the Electoral Act in a manner which has ultimately benefited the first respondent. Mashonaland Central, page 159, the report by the ZBC, it does two things. Number one, it mentions figures. Number two, it attributes those figures to a ZEC official. It says by 5:30 p.m., 105,000 people had voted in Mashonaland Central. The final figure that one gets from ZEC is that an hour and 30 minutes later, plus 370,000 people voted. Is it humanly possible? But it doesn't end there. Then there is the issue of identical polling results. There are at least 16 polling stations with identical results. Identical results for Chamisa, identical results for Mnangagwa, identical spoiled votes. And in all those places, Mnangagwa not only wins, but wins big. It's like a kid was playing with the figures. That, with respect, is not how an election is conducted.
We'll now give the opportunity to Mr. Kanengoni.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission cannot be taken to task to say, why is the voter turnout in my central at this particular level and not at that particular level? Voters behave the way they do. No one knows why. Maybe behavioral scientists may be able to answer the question if they study it.
Mr. Kanengoni, there's the averment that several polling stations showed identical results.
And the simple point we make is that there's no need to be theoretical about it. We have the returns. This is something that happened. We show you the returns. And we've put the returns for two of those polling stations here to illustrate the point.
You say it happened?
Yes.
But in his presentation, Pofo says it's actually 16 polling stations where there are identical results. You heard it?
Yes, we did. Even in the affidavit, they put a bit more of the polling stations there. But we chose this to illustrate to the court. But for the rest, it did happen. It did actually occur.
We'll now go back to the applicant. Why go for speculative conclusions of manipulation?
The point that I wish to make is that this is evidence of manipulation by ZEC after the process. Now, if you go to what they call the primary data, you're going to see manipulated data. So the applicant cannot ask a court to open residue which has already been manipulated. If you go to the residue, you will drink from a poisoned well. When you look at the figures, let's look at those that.
I'd like to stop it there. The most important thing in this video is it confirms what we've been saying here, that the process is so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step to do is to withdraw. What the court is being told there, take for instance the instance of the 16 polling stations with identical votes. And more significantly, in all those 16, Mnangagwa was doing very well. I think what the actually rational explanation for those figures is that those 16 polling stations, what happened is they were entered and they found Mnangagwa had not crossed the line. And so they were brought back again into the system and ended again as if they were separate polling stations. This is just double entry to boost up, to get Mnangagwa over the line. This is a situation where you're saying to yourself, you can never win. The ZANU-PF candidate is being assisted to win the elections, even when it means creating additional fictitious polling stations. For ZANU-PF itself, of course, it makes sense for them to participate. Why not? But for the ordinary people, it doesn't make any sense at all to keep participating in these flawed elections. That's the argument. Ben.
SADC simply stated in the report to say the process lacked traceability, credibility, and accountability. You, in essence, they're saying you couldn't make head or tails of what was going on. That alone should be enough to tell people that participating in rigged elections is absolute madness, and it's tragic. Because at the end of the day, we know that once we have participated, it is now water under the bridge. We have crossed that line and we can never go back. ZANU-PF has got the mandate to rule for the whole term. And again, we come back to the question that you asked. Why is it that we know all these things, but we are so adamant that we have to participate, come what may, knowing fully well that our participation will never, ever get us, through to remove ZANU-PF, because they basically own and control this thing. If I say control on its own, it really doesn't, emphasize they own the process. They are the process. So why do we really think that after 45 years of doing the same thing, that come 2028, we will be able to achieve the impossible, if I may say? It's a big why.
The other important issue here is, why are the opposition continuing to participate? In the video clip that we showed, it was within the powers of the opposition to say, let's open the sealed ballot boxes of all those 16 polling stations that had identical results. Credit where credit is due. Chief Justice Malava asked that question. Why are you going for the speculative results when you could go and look at the original data? What you are saying there is very simple. Demand that the sealed boxes of the 16 polling stations should be opened. And that would have shown that actually there are only 8 real polling stations. The other 8 are duplicate. As much as they could re-enter the results of one polling station twice, they could not recreate a polling station complete with the sealed ballot boxes, a duplicate. And so ZEC would have failed to produce that duplicate sealed box. This would have shown and proven the electoral process was flawed. The question then is, why is the opposition the one who say, no, we don't want to drink from that poisoned well? The Constitutional Court, the Chief Justice himself said, let's open it. Why didn't you ask it to be opened? Even at that late stage, he could have said, yes, we wanted it opened, and that opportunity was denied. The Constitutional Court itself may have ordered it. There's nothing to stop them doing it. So here we have got the opposition that is now working in cahoots with ZANU-PF. They've been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed and that the only logical step is to withdraw. But they have not done so. And at the bottom of the screen there is a quotation from David Coltart, one of the opposition leaders. A quotation from his book. And in it, Coltart is explaining why the opposition has never withdrawn from these flawed elections. They fear that if one group withdraws, the other participates, they will win the gravy train seats being offered by ZANU-PF. They've been participating out of greed, pure and simple. The question then is, why are the ordinary people so naive and so gullible? They failed to see what the opposition is doing. That, unfortunately, is at the heart of Zimbabwe's political crisis. We have an electorate that is so naive, so gullible, they failed, even after 25 years of MDC, CCC doing nothing, they failed to realize that they have got an opposition that has been ZANU-PF, Team B in all but name, playing for Team A to win and for Team A to have legitimacy. Ben.
You know, one thing probably that people or the citizens of Zimbabwe do not realize is they are the main ingredient to a successful election process. I'll give you an example. You know, we can talk about if we do not participate and others participate, but if you were to have 1 million or 2 million people that are denied a meaningful say in who governs the country, that is a big figure. And that itself is a betrayal to democracy. You have denied people their rights. So if we today stand and say, if we do not reform the process, if we do not fix the system, a broken system, we will not be part of that election. Right there, and we take a stand. We have simply put in motion what SADC and everybody else has been saying. And I sincerely believe we would have shook the whole political system in Zimbabwe. Questions will be asked. What do we do? People will not participate. And rightfully, because we have been warned over and over again. Your guys' way of doing things is not it. It doesn't meet international standards. It doesn't even meet your own standards. I think this is where we have to begin from, with that declaration. And of course, there are steps that will follow and the consequences that will follow for taking that stance. But that is the starting point. No reforms, no elections. That should be, it's long overdue. If you were to ask me, it's long overdue, because we've been doing the same thing over and over and over and over. We sound like a broken record, expecting a different outcome. This is what has kept Zimbabwe in this year spot for the past 45 years. Unfortunately, the question still remains, why?
I'd like to give the final say in this matter to Professor Jonathan Moyo, explaining why ZEC, as it's presently constituted, will never deliver free, fair, and credible elections.
Gumba is the mother of the rigging, and Malaba is the father of the rigging, endorsed what the mother was doing. It is actually scandalous. You see, ZEC is not supposed to be controlled by any authority.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
It is an independent constitutional body. In fact, independent commission. It's a Chapter 12 institution. But ZEC did not run anything important. It never did. The computers were run by Africom. The registration, accreditation, and so forth were run by a CIO company. So, using their instruments, either Matsanga, who is actually active, she's employed, she joined the, she was not joined, she was seconded to the electoral body in 2008 as a divisional intelligence officer. Now she is a director in the CIO. As we speak right now, she's a director, and she was congratulated and rewarded for rigging the 2018 election, and she was given a house in Borodale, a posh mansion in there. So there is a serious problem that, whereas on paper ZEC is supposed to be an independent constitutional body that runs elections transparently, efficiently, and impartially. No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because it does not even itself run. The elections are run for ZEC by the securocrat.
That is the truth. So to come back to the original question asked, why are Zimbabweans still participating in the election processes? That there is overwhelming evidence that the process is flawed, is illegal, and that if you participate, you only give the process legitimacy. Well, one of the answers has to be that we have failed to draw those lines ourselves. To accept that if the election process, in this case here, for instance, the issue of SAC, if it's so corrupted to the point where it's no longer independent, where the process itself is so corrupted that a candidate will find their votes being topped up to get them over the line, then the process is meaningless. We ourselves have failed to draw the line in the sand and say, and come to the conclusion and firm conclusion that the only logical step is to withdraw. We have failed to do so. Each time ZANU-PF has crossed those red lines, we have moved them on. We have shown that we are prepared to participate, and we have been conned by the opposition that we can still win the elections, when in fact the opposition had their own agenda. The bottom line, I think the people of Zimbabwe have got to open their eyes. If after 45 years you cannot see that you cannot win rigged elections, and you need to have those processes checked, then you are in serious trouble as a nation. This is just going to carry on. There is absolutely no excuse for participating in 2028 elections with no meaningful democratic reforms implemented. None. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.